country's nuclear weapons program. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Fox's chief White House correspondent John Roberts has been on this story, and he has details at this hour. John?
Well, this is an extraordinary moment in history, Tucker, just for the very fact that we heard from the White House tonight that the President of the United States has agreed to meet with the President of North Korea. I mean, nobody thought that anything like this could ever happen unless it was under the most extraordinary of circumstances. But this is kind of from a beginning level. You know, Kim Jong-un had talks with South Korean officials earlier this week. Those South Korean officials came to the White House today to say that Kim is committed to the denuclearization of the North Korean peninsula, and he held out that olive branch for a meeting with President Trump. President Trump, who has said in the past many times he'd be happy to meet with Kim, agreed. But this is aiming toward the denuclearization of the North Korean peninsula. This is not about freezing North Korea's nuclear program, as has happened so many times in the past, only to watch them cheat. President Trump is making it clear that he wants Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear program. A statement from the press secretary just a short time ago will pass along to you. President Trump greatly appreciates the nice words of the South Korean delegation and President Moon. He will accept the invitation to meet with Kim Jong-un at a place and time to be determined. We look forward to the denuclearization of North Korea. In the meantime, all sanctions and maximum pressure must remain. The question of where is probably one of the biggest questions right now. I would assume that President Trump is not going to go to Pyongyang in North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. I don't expect that Kim Jong-un would come to the United States because he might fear that he'll be thrown in an American jail and never see the light of day ever again. Not that that would happen. So it may be that they choose potentially South Korea right there along the border in Panmunjom, which will be the site of the talks between South Korea's President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un later in May. Or maybe it's a third country, some neutral country somewhere else in the world where everyone can meet. How did we get to this point? The White House is just walking us through that in a conference call right now. But Chung Eui-yong, who is the South Korean national security advisor, said in the statement outside the White House here that it was due to President Trump's program of maximum pressure that North Korea came to the table. They said that while Kim is committed to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, he also understands the joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States must continue. Now, President Trump, as you'll remember, Tucker, came under an extraordinary amount of criticism for his tough-minded approach toward North Korea. A lot of people were saying he wanted to start a war with the North. It would seem that exactly the opposite has happened. Rather than the missiles flying, it looks like there will be talks. And it really is, when you look at everywhere we were up until this point, an extraordinary moment in history. Tucker?
It's astounding. John, was there any mention of the role, if any, that China played in this?
I think that this was very much a behind-the-scenes sort of thing. When you talk about the program of maximum pressure, that wasn't just the United States. It was the United States and a number of other countries, first and foremost among them China. President Trump has pushed Xi Jinping time and time again to get tougher with North Korea, to increase the sanctions, to put the squeeze on North Korean banks, to not allow workers in North Korea North Korean workers in China to send money back to North Korea. We don't know exactly how much China did in this particular case. It seemed like it was limited, but at this moment, it appears like it may have been enough. So we'll see where this goes. Nobody is under any illusions here in the United States that Kim Jong-un, they might think that he's sincere, but nobody thinks that he's not potentially playing fast and loose here. We had John Bolton, the former UN ambassador, on our air the other day saying that he thinks that they're just trying to buy time so that they can complete their nuclear weapons program. Then they've got a very big bargaining chip. But they're looking at this optimistically here at the White House, Tucker, thinking that this may be the opening that the United States has waited for and tried for an awfully long time.
Well, it's unexpected, to say the least. John Roberts at the White House, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
Harry Kazianis is a North Korea expert and director of defense studies at the Center for the National Interest, and he joins us tonight. Harry, I don't know anybody, any of the geniuses running our foreign policy in Washington who predicted anything like this.
Well, I certainly didn't. That's for certain. I actually thought there was a better chance we'd be at nuclear war with North Korea than there'd be peace talks. But there's something we're missing, Tucker. There's a little bit of context. South Korean press about 2 weeks ago came out with some reports that were fascinating. They actually speculated that North Korea was actually on the edge of financial bankruptcy. By by October, their foreign exchange reserves are probably going to be exhausted, and their dollar reserves are going to be exhausted.
Yes.
So that means North Korea is essentially bankrupt. You can't build a lot of nuclear weapons and a lot of missiles when you have no money to do it, to pay all the different spies and people to bring those materials back.
Right.
You can't also feed your people that way. So I do think the North Koreans might be trying to buy some time here, but I also think that Kim Jong-un's newfound pragmatism, there might be a bigger reason for it.
So what do you make of this? Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests.
As long as we're talking, that's the other caveat to that point. So I guess as long as that both sides are negotiating and we're trying to figure something out, then they won't test. There's a bigger point to all this. What I would urge President Trump to do, meet with Kim Jong-un, throw the Hail Mary. History shows us sometimes these things can actually happen and work out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But what this administration cannot do, Tucker, is give him any bribes, give him any economic incentives. The North Koreans have tried that in the past to come to the table. That would be the wrong move, and that would be a mistake.
Huh. So what is the gambit? Continued pressure, I guess, in the words of South Korea?
I think what we need to do is we need to test North Korea's intentions. Maybe they're sincere. Maybe they are willing to come to the negotiating table. Because we have to remember something here. The North Koreans, time is against them. Their economy is a disaster. It's worth something like $14 billion. South Korea's is worth something like $1.2 trillion. Someday the North Korean state will collapse. And I think Kim realizes this. So this may be a historic moment. I never thought I would see this before, probably in decades. So I think Trump has to explore it.
And he may be the one president who would actually do this, who would go meet with the North Korean leader. Is he going to stop on his way in Oslo to get the Nobel Peace Prize?
He should be given the Nobel. If he lands this, if he closes the ultimate deal of a lifetime, you give that man the Nobel Prize. There's no question.
But let's be, I mean, the chances of that are right around zero, I think.
There may be
of getting the Nobel Peace Prize. They gave it to Obama for getting elected, so I definitely
do anything.
Right, I'm aware.
Yeah. So you know what? Trump's got to explore this.
So what happens? I mean, just to game this out a little bit, and it's obviously this is speculative, but the end game, of course, is reunification. The Korea is becoming one country again. What would that mean for everyone else?
It means a lot of good. It means a lot of bad. The bad is the toughest part. The cost to reunify North Korea with South Korea is probably something like $10 trillion. You're talking about having to build roads, bridges, take care of their people. The economics of that would be totally insane. Plus, you would have China and Japan very nervous about what a strong Korea would mean for the region. Just thinking that through is just astronomical.
Huh. And China would not be in favor, and Japan would not be in favor.
I don't think Japan, I think you could convince them in the long term. China, I think it would be one of their biggest fears.
Well, we're thinking ahead. But for the moment, this is really, it's amazing.
It's history
and again, as usual, no one in D.C. predicted it. Harry, great to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Appreciate it. We've got a lot more on this breaking story later in the show. On immigration now, that was the sleeper issue of the 2016 election. No one in power on either side wanted to talk about it, but voters did. They knew our immigration policy was not serving their interests, and that's why Donald Trump won. You'd think both parties would have learned something from that experience, kind of a big deal. And the message was clear. Voters don't want open borders, and they've said so emphatically. But Congress is still not even pretending to listen. Many Republican members on the Hill are still pushing for a mass amnesty under the Orwellian title of comprehensive immigration reform. And Democrats, well, they've gone completely off the deep end. 20 years ago, Bill Clinton gave speeches, including the State of the Union address, calling illegal immigration a danger to the middle class, because it was, demonstrably. Try saying that now at a Democratic fundraising dinner. You'd be dragged off the stage and charged with bigotry. Democrats are now affirmatively in favor of illegal immigration, not an overstatement. They try to shut down the government on behalf of illegal aliens. They claim that immigration laws that Congress passed with their support are now illegitimate, and that the officers charged with enforcing those laws are fascists. And of course, they've made all rational conversation impossible by framing the entire issue as a battle in some sort of larger race war. It's shocking, but that's not an exaggeration. Watch this.
The Attorney General is trying to distract the American people from a failed immigration system by painting a racist broad brush of our immigrant community as dangerous criminals.
The racists who are driving immigration policy in the White House are defining the agenda for every House Republican and are shaping the brand of the Republican Party, not just as the party who doesn't want poor or Latin American immigrants, but doesn't want brown or black or anyone who isn't white in this country.
Since last night, the president put forth a plan. That plan is a campaign to make America white again.
The plan she's talking about, of course, would have admitted 3 million non-white immigrants. Talk about demagoguery. Democrats aren't simply the pro-immigration party. They're now the anti-border party, the party opposed to citizenship itself. They don't want the border secured. They oppose the deportation of anyone under any circumstances, even after criminal offenses. They push to give illegal immigrants welfare benefits, driver's licenses, in-state tuition, state-funded attorneys to fight American immigration law. They think Kate Steinle's killer has more rights than you do. When you confront them on any of this, they say that American citizens just aren't impressive enough. They're too fat, too lazy, too addicted to drugs. They demand decent wages. They insist on constitutional rights like, I don't know, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms. All very inconvenient. Some of them said that out loud. Bill Kristol basically said that out loud. Democratic leaders would like to see these people replaced by compliant foreigners who will serve the ruling class without complaint. Well, do voters actually support any of that? Well, actually, they don't. But it doesn't matter. Democrats know if they import enough new voters, they'll be able to run the country forever. Would you want to live in that country? Probably not. But judge for yourself. California Democratic Senator Kamala Harris recently told the rest of us that California, her state, is our future. Listen.
These folks are really mired in rolling back the clock in time, and that's not going to happen. California represents the future, and they don't like it, but there you go.
Yeah, they don't like it, but California is our future, says future presidential candidate Kamala Harris. What would that mean, actually, if the future were California? Well, California has more poverty than any state. It has the highest number of residents who don't speak English at home. According to U.S. News, it has the lowest quality of life in the entire country, 50 out of 50 states. Housing prices are totally out of control. Homelessness is overwhelming. Go there and see for yourselves. Hypodermic needles literally piling up in the street. The middle class can't flee fast enough. In the past decade, 1 million more people have moved out of California than have moved in. A U-Haul from San Jose to Phoenix costs 10 times as much as a U-Haul going the other way, because no one's going the other way. This is the future that Kamala Harris is boasting about. All this could soon, by the way, be a political problem for Democrats. The midterms are coming up this fall. Democrats are going to win seats for sure. The out party always does. Republicans have made some really dumb mistakes. They're going to win seats. The question is, will they retake Congress? According to all predictions, they should. They've definitely promised their voters they're going to retake Congress. And yet, in spite of all these advantages, they may not. They may fall short. Why? Because their positions on immigration are radical and crazy, and they have no popular support. In a democracy, popular support still matters. Brian Dean Wright is a Democrat. He's also a former CIA operative who says the open borders agenda is not sustainable, virtuous as it may be, and he joins us tonight. So, Brian, what do you mean by that? Why is it not sustainable to let every poor person in the world move here?
Well, here's the bottom line. This argument, this debate has really focused on the past. How have past immigrants made America's greatness? Exactly. And indeed they have. We all have connections to the fantastic immigrant communities, right? So what's happening now and in the next 15 to 20 years? And what we're seeing is something not related or connected to politics, but actually technology. And what is happening in robotics, automation, and machine learning is it's really effectively making human labor less and less important and relevant. And that's especially true for jobs that immigrants hold, and by the way, blue-collar folks and people of color in inner cities in particular.
Exactly.
So the Obama administration came out with this study in late 2016, right before they left, and they said, look, we're on the verge of losing jobs. If you have them under $20 an hour, you are likely, and I'm going to quote, going to be automated into obsolescence. Basically, your job's going to go away. And they said if you earn less than $20 an hour, you can forget about any kind of quality of life, right? So these are the kinds of jobs that immigrants take. So we need to be talking about how this technology is going to impact not only people here, but the future kinds of people that we should be embracing as they come into this country, to include a merit-based system. Look, everybody can have a different opinion on whether or not we should be doing this, but we should be talking about what's driving this change, and that change is technology.
I mean, previous waves of immigration began at the start of the Industrial Revolution. We're at the end of it. So it's a totally different country with different economic needs. What you just said, I'm going to print out and put at the top of my list of things to worry about. The jobs that previous generations of immigrants held are going to be gone. So this is so obvious, it should be particularly obvious to people in California, which is leading the technological change. Why does nobody say that, ever?
It's incredibly frustrating, I think, for those of us who have been looking at this issue very, very closely. So I work with an organization now, or collaborate with an innovation collective that is trying to figure out how do you take care of the people who are already here, re-inspire, re-engage them, particularly in the flyover states, which is an offensive term, but we've embraced it and like, fine, let's do this. How do we fix this country and this economy so that they win? All right? Absent that, who is going to take care of the folks who are already here? Nevertheless, irrespective of the folks that we would be importing down the road, how are we going to pay for the trillion-dollar programs to take care of the people who are already here, let alone bringing in new folks, which about 60% don't have any kind of notable skills? How are we going to take care of them if ultimately they're not providing a lot back into the economy? Exactly. So I think for the next 5 to 10 years, we have got to be focused on where these technologies are headed. And by the way, I've been slammed by folks on the left, including Media Matters and others, for even bringing this subject up. So it doesn't really bode well for having this conversation.
No, it doesn't.
I'll tell you, if anybody wants to be angry about this, reach out to the people in San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York and Boston who are creating this technology. To your point, I mean, get angry at them for creating a system where we're going to have to be more thoughtful about who we take in this country.
Yes, and we are angry. By the way, let me just say, it's thrilling to hear somebody say something that is demonstrably true that everyone else is afraid to say, and you just did it, and I'm grateful that you did. Thank you, Brian.
You betcha.
A supporter of the Open Borders agenda on immigration joins us next to rebut what you just heard. Also, did the president insult North Korea's dictator so much that he actually agreed to a meeting and made disarm? This news is moving fast, and we're going to have the latest on that story when we come back. Well, the Democratic Party has become completely radical, as defined specifically by outside the mainstream of public opinion in a democracy. And immigration, that's exactly where they are. They're going to run on that, apparently. Some people think it's a good idea. Richard Goodstein does. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns. Not being mean.
Not exactly.
Not being mean, but you did. Okay, so here's the point. The last guest, who I should note, is a sincere Democrat. He's not like some fake Democrat we brought on to make a point. He's a Democrat, but he said, look, every study, all by liberals, the Obama people, the McKinsey company, the consultants, all of them predict that like a huge percentage, 20%, say, of all of our blue-collar jobs are going away really soon. And yet we're importing people who, as he noted, are 60% without meaningful skills, poor people with no education. It doesn't mean they're bad people. What are they going to do? This is crazy.
Well, here are some industries where I think we're not going to be losing jobs so quickly. Hospitality.
Yes.
Construction. Agriculture. Landscaping. Retail, healthcare. I mean, this is where actually a lot of these undocumented immigrants are working. And you see what's happening in California, where these businesses are just absolutely caught in a vice. You got ICE on one hand, this California law on the other, basically saying not so fast, and they're losing employees and they're losing customers because people just don't really want to be around them.
Most of the jobs you mentioned are designed to serve rich people. And so this policy itself is designed to make sure that everyone in your neighborhood gets cheap housekeepers. I get it. And so the ruling class is in favor of that. But I'm talking about actual jobs, one that you can support a family on. The old industrial jobs that are going away.
Right.
Why would you ever, in the face of that change, import people who are not prepared to compete in a digital, high-tech economy? Why would you do that?
So again, when you talk about importing people, in the Democrats,
letting them come.
Okay, fine. Understand that when the Democrats were in control, we had a Gang of 8 bill that 14 Republicans, Orrin Hatch, Lamar Alexander, not lefties, supported. And we also had a net outflow of people from the U.S. to Mexico, right? That's when the Democrats were in charge, right? So this notion about open borders, that's a caricature. I get it. But it just happens not to comport with reality.
But they're literally arguing for open borders now. I mean, they're arguing for them now. Any border enforcement is not just wrong or against this country's economic interests, which is a real conversation, which I'd be happy to have, but it's racist. You don't like people of a different color. They're basically describing this as a kind of race war. Is there a more divisive way to conduct politics than to say that kind of crap out loud when A, you know it's a lie, and B, you know it's going to leave permanent wounds?
Well, again, so Kamala Harris, who you quoted earlier, said, I'm a former prosecutor. If ICE wants to take out gang members and violent criminals and so forth, I'm there, because that's what they should be doing. If somebody's here that's undocumented, that's a violent criminal, get them out. That's what she's been saying. Look, as far as kind of targeting people by race, Jeff Sessions, I'm quite sure, went into California with his program and his lawsuit because the vice was tightening elsewhere in the Trump administration. Stormy Daniels, things weren't looking good for him personally and the administration generally, and it's a good way to kind of talk about the other.
Okay, but here's the truth.
It is.
Lawmakers can debate the wisdom of laws. Okay, that's what they do. Lawmakers should never encourage others to disregard laws, to flout the law, to undermine the law. Their job is to make laws, not encourage lawlessness.
Agreed.
So if Democrats don't like immigration laws, the ones they voted for in the Congress, why don't they work to change them rather than try to convince people that laws you don't like don't need to be obeyed, which is what they're doing now?
Well, what they're saying is that by law, the federal government actually cannot force a state to spend its resources. I mean, it's rich. Will you agree that you have people from Alabama who absolutely stiff-armed the Voting Rights Act, saying now we think the state should really be disempowered and should follow what Washington's saying.
Nobody is arguing this. We've been through this ground many times. States are not obligated to enforce federal law. They are prohibited from undermining it, from thwarting it, from obstructing it. And that's exactly what they're doing. And you know it. It's illegal. They're doing it anyway. The lunatic mayor of Oakland, whose actual American citizens are dying because parts of Oakland are terrifying, rather than meet their needs, she's encouraging illegals to escape federal law enforcement.
Well,
that's obstructing the law.
She's advising them of their rights, which if there was some other right, if it was the Second Amendment, you'd say, thank God, Mayor.
They don't have rights. They're not American citizens.
Well, she's basically
and her concern should be for American citizens.
She was basically saying, do you not have to respond to a knock on the door? That's kind of a right that you've got.
The cops are coming, run.
Right.
No snitching or whatever. She's another out-of-touch rich lady who doesn't understand that her obligations to Americans, not to foreigners.
What law enforcement people would tell you in Oakland and elsewhere in California is that to the extent that the immigrants feel beset upon by the police and by law enforcement, they're less likely to report domestic violence and other things because they just don't want to come forward.
Who cares? Okay,
well,
look, I'm not against, for the fifth, I'm actually for immigrants. I like them. But shouldn't lawmakers make their bottom line the well-being of citizens? Democrats are not doing that. If they don't win the House, I'm going to come on the show with you and gloat because their views are so out of the mainstream, they may not even win the House.
I don't think this is why, if they don't win the House, it's going to be. Because the fact of the matter is, if you look at the polls are no wall. No reduction in immigration, right? And yes, on Dreamers. That's what the polls actually say.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We said the poll said that, I don't know, in 2016, and Donald Trump won.
Although he lost by 3 million votes.
We're all so
3 million
stupid.
short, but yeah, he won.
Thank you, Richard.
Sure.
California says the federal government's immigration lawsuit is an act of war, which is why the state of insurrection against American law is in place. A lot of stuff going on in this country. The director of ICE joins us to talk about it. The federal government is suing the state of California over its aggressive stand against federal immigration law. Governor Jerry Brown of California calls this an act of war, and it is. But who fired the first shots is the question. California officials are trying to undermine, as we said, the laws that Congress passed. Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf publicly warned of an impending ICE raid so that criminals could go into hiding and escape federal agents. Gubernatorial candidate Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of San Francisco, says that other local leaders should imitate her. Thomas Homan is acting director of ICE, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Director, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So when you have the largest state in the country saying it's illegal for anyone who lives in that state, private citizens, to cooperate with you, a federal law enforcement agency, what does that do to the work you're trying to do in the state of California?
It makes our enforcement duties a lot more difficult in the state of California. Rather than taking custody of a criminal alien who's a public safety threat inside the security and the safety of a county jail,
right,
where we don't have access to weapons, now we are forced to go into neighborhoods, places of employment to locate these public safety threats on their turf, where they could have access to who knows what weapons. My biggest concern is one of my agents is going to knock on the door someday, and he's not going to go home that night. And that's very unfortunate because he should have been able able to apprehend that person in the jail and not be forced to go on his trip to arrest him.
So this is making it more dangerous for federal immigration agents, but there's an irony here because the state of California, its politicians are claiming that you guys are going door to door and rousting the innocent, but you're saying that their policies are making you go door to door.
Yeah, look, let's be clear. The sanctuary city policies are forcing our hand, right? For decades, we've had access to county jails. We can take, some of us in the country illegally, and they're sitting in a county jail, which means they're not a choir boy. The locals and state officials have made the decision to lock these people up. Well, and for decades, we went to the jail, identified them as illegal aliens, and take them into custody and remove them from the country, remove them from the community. But because they've limited our access to the jails, they don't share information with us. Now we are forced to go in neighborhoods, which when the governor says he's protecting immigrant communities or the mayor says she's protecting immigrant communities, they're not. They're releasing criminal aliens back into the very communities they live and they victimize. So they're putting the immigrant communities at increased danger of crime, and they put the immigrant community at increased arrest by ICE, because when we go to a home to arrest that target, if we find others, they'll be arrested too. So they've actually put them in a bad position. And I'll add this. If they went to the immigrant community and asked the immigrant community, where would you rather have ICE, in a county jail or in your neighborhood? I guarantee they will tell you the county jail.
How does it make you feel to hear your agents described, in effect, as bigots, as a domestic Gestapo by Democrats in California?
It's an insult to the 20,000 American patriots that work for ICE. These are men and women that get up every day and strap a gun to their hip to defend this nation. They leave the safety and security of their home every day to protect their neighborhoods, to protect the community. And they're enforcing the law that Congress enacted. They're doing their job. They're sworn oath. So it's an insult to many fine men and women.
You don't make the laws, Congress does. So how do you respond when Brian Fallon, who's a former spokesman for Hillary Clinton, says that Democrats ought to run on eliminating ICE?
If you look at the work ICE did, how many criminal aliens have we removed from these communities? How much safer have we made these communities? These politicians, they need to talk to the victims of alien crime. Talk to the parents that I talked to that lost children at the hands of criminal aliens. They need to talk to California, the California Sheriff's Association. The governor's sheriffs came out in support of ICE. They did a press release last night. If I could read just one sentence in their press release, it shows Governor Brown is wrong on this issue. This has come from his own sheriffs. We oppose SB 54. The bill is enacted still containing significant liabilities, which include restricting our communication with federal law enforcement about the release of wanted, undocumented criminals from our jails, including known gang members and other serious offenders. His own sheriffs agree with what ICE and DOJ saying.
It's shocking. Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming on. That was great.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. We have newly released radio transmissions from the Parkland massacre in Florida. They tell us a lot. That's next. We now have police radio traffic from the Parkland shooting. It includes disgraced Officer Scott Peterson, the one who failed to enter Stoneman Douglas High School to confront the shooter and save the 17 who were murdered. Here's part of it.
We have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1,200 building. We don't have any description yet. We just hear shots, but appears to be shots fired.
Didn't go in, just kept talking. The radio traffic does shed some light on the biggest scandal of that massacre. After failing to respond to numerous warnings about Nicholas Cruz, the shooter, Broward County Sheriff's deputies also failed to take action during the shooting that obviously could have saved lives. Well, Florida's Republican-controlled legislature just passed a battery of new gun control laws. The specific law raises the minimum age for buying a gun in the state to 21. It imposes a minimum 3-day waiting period and bans bump stocks. It also creates a school for arming employees, but requires them to complete at least 12 hours of diversity training. The law is still waiting for Governor Rick Scott's signature. He could veto it. We don't know. Representative David Richardson is a Democrat in the Florida State House, and he joins us tonight. Representative, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you didn't support this bill, but I know that you're an advocate for gun control laws more broadly. Tell me why it contains 12 hours of mandatory diversity training. How would that stop mass shootings?
Well, I think the diversity training was added because it would give everyone an opportunity to understand different communities and their needs and the diversity. So I know that there was a lot of concern from the communities of color about putting guns in schools and the Stand Your Ground laws here in the state of Florida, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And so there felt like it would be beneficial to have diversity training as part of that bill.
Well, I mean, I understand the political dynamics that lawmakers were bullied by interest groups to do it, but let me just re-ask my question. How would that prevent future mass shootings, which is, I thought, the point of this?
Well, I don't think that speaks to the prevention of the future mass shootings. I think it was added there because the Guardian program was included in the bill, which was part of the bill that I had deep concerns about, and that's why I voted no on the bill. But as you know, the Guardian program would allow school personnel, non-teachers, to be armed to carry guns in schools after an extensive training over 130 hours, and 12 hours of that would have to be in diversity training.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes the whole thing seem like a joke to the rest of us because, of course, that's totally unrelated to the supposed justification for the law. So you can see why that would cast some doubt on the intentions of the whole thing. So let me just ask you, so I presume you support the part of the law that raises the age for purchasing firearms to 21. I'm not sure we know whether that's going to prevent mass shootings or save life, but just from a constitutional rights perspective, so that's a right specifically mentioned in the Constitution. Okay, it's not like the right to buy alcohol. I mean, it's specifically mentioned. Are there any other rights specifically mentioned, like the right to vote or the right to free speech, that we could kind of bump the age cap up to 21 on?
Well, as you know, we limit certain activities. For example, when you can get your driver's license, I
Sure.
understand those are not constitutional issues.
No, they're not.
But you're talking about the Second Amendment, of course, and I fully support the Second Amendment. But it's something I think that we need to take a careful look at because, you know, the Second Amendment was written in a time when we had militiamen carrying muskets and pouches of gunpowder, and we don't have that anymore.
No, that's
and the
true.
other thing that
Wait,
sometimes
may I just
gets
stop you there?
lost
No, you
is
make a fair point. I just want to go back and make sure I understand. You say we need to take a look at the Second Amendment. What do you mean? Revising it? Repealing it? What does that mean?
I am not in favor of repealing it, but I think that we should take a look at it in the context of when it was written versus today. I don't think the Founding Fathers could have anticipated the type of weaponry we have today.
That's true.
And the other thing that often gets ignored,
may I just say, I'm sorry, but this is important because you're a lawmaker, but they also couldn't have anticipated the internet. They barely just had the printing press. So should we also take a look at the First Amendment? I mean, why wouldn't we if that's how we're going to evaluate our constitutional rights?
We have taken a look at the First Amendment several times, and that's why you can't yell fire in a movie theater.
But that's basically all you can't do. Any other speech is allowed according to the Supreme Court. But do you think, again, those decisions were before the internet, do you think we should revise the First Amendment too? Are all constitutional rights up for revision based on technological advances?
So guns are the subject that we're talking about tonight, not the First Amendment.
No, the Constitution.
Let me just say, Tucker, let me just get this in, and let me just say this.
Yeah, of course.
So what often gets lost in the discussion with the Second Amendment is the part that starts with the Second about a well-regulated militia.
Yes.
So why aren't we talking about that? Where is this well-regulated militia?
Well, the Supreme Court has actually brought that up at least twice in the past 10 years, and both times specifically said that amendment applies to the individual, not to the militia. So that is a settled legal question. I'm just wondering how the Florida State Legislature is reinterpreting that, but whatever. I guess we'll find out. Congressman, Representative, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that and your explanations. Louis Farrakhan is, of course, a racist, doesn't hide it, anti-Semitic, says that right out loud, and a fixture of the Democratic Party. But no one seems to care in the media. Kind of weird. Mark Stein's been noticing this. He'll join us next to weigh in. Well, it turns out lots of Democrats are friends with Louis Farrakhan. Congressman Danny Davis of Illinois calls him an outstanding human being, said that to a reporter from the Daily Caller, smiled as he did. Even Barack Obama has been photographed meeting with Minister Farrakhan. But Mr. Farrakhan has a complicated history. He has, among other things, praised Adolf Hitler, He said that white people deserve to die. He blames the Jews for 9/11. But for some reason, nobody on Morning Joe seems to notice. Why is that? Mark Stein is an author and columnist. He joins us tonight. So, Mark, to put this in context for you, the Dukes of Hazzard, I don't know if you were living in this country then, but it was a pretty popular TV show, 70s, early 80s.
Right.
It was pulled out of rotation because there's a Confederate flag on a car. And that was considered too much.
On the roof of the car.
On the roof.
Yeah.
For the sensibilities of American viewers. Protect the children from that. But then Danny Davis is hanging out with a guy who's saying, you know, the Jews are bloodsuckers or whatever horrible thing he's saying. And, like, nobody cares. Because why?
Because he's on their team, and the left are very serious about this. Minister Farrakhan has said that instead of boring on about what Hitler did to the Jews should ask themselves about what they did to Hitler to make him so mad at them.
Did he really say that?
That's how he's formulated it on multiple occasions. The media and powerful Democrats, such as the deputy chairman, Keith Ellison, looked the other way. They've looked the other way since at least the so-called Million Man March, when he went nuts and started talking on the Mall that he was standing by the Lincoln and Jefferson memorials, and Lincoln was the 16th president, and Jefferson was the 3rd president, and if you add them up, 16 and 3 makes 19, which is the precise height of each of the memorials, and 19, the 9 means there's a pregnant womb, and the 1 means there's a secret that's going to be uncovered. He's a nut. He's a nut. Now, it's not just that he hates Jews, but he claims to have been abducted on, I believe, at least 2 occasions by aliens. The first time he was taken up into space to commune with the spirit of Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam. And the second time he was apparently abducted by Jews who've got a UFO. There's Jews in space. Who knew? So it means that whenever Jared Kushner or Tony Blair or whoever solves the Middle East peace process, they're going to have to get right on Minister Farrakhan's rocket ship and go up to planet Zongo and sort out the squabbling Jews and Nation of Islam guys up there in space. It says something absolutely appalling about the Democrat Party that an obvious nut, that Obama, that even Maxine Waters, that Keith Ellison, that all these Democrats are so scared of a lunatic that they feel obliged to kiss up to him.
You just blew. I covered the Million Man March. I didn't know any of that. That was amazing. He's even nuttier than I imagined.
Yeah, it's all in the numbers. 16 plus 3. Look, he makes great calypso albums, or he did in the 50s. And he can carry off a red bow tie with a plum, which, as you know, Tucker, is more difficult than it looks. So let's give him that. But it's embarrassing that this nut is a power broker in the Democrat Party, and the media won't cover it.
I wish we had an hour to talk about this. Mark Stein, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
We'll have more on tonight's breaking news. Astounding, really, breaking news. President Trump's planned meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Nobody saw that coming. We'll be right back. Fox News alert: the Trump administration remarkably planning the first ever meeting between a sitting president and a North Korean leader. Nobody saw that coming. Brad Blakeman is a former member of George W. Bush's senior White House staff, and he joins us tonight. Brad, just as a political matter, as a foreign policy matter, this is shocking news.
Yeah.
What are the ramifications of it?
Well, in Trump vernacular, this is huge. It really is, because it came out of left field, and I think it came out of a policy that was so dramatically different than President Obama. Strategic patience for Obama versus enough BS from Trump. He had it. He put sanctions on. He got the Chinese to do things they were never willing to do under the prior administration, and we gave up nothing for this meeting. Sanctions continue, our joint exercises continue, and there may be a meeting in May with the president. He accepted, but there's a lot of groundwork to be laid before that meeting will be had.
What's so interesting, though, is that strategy was greeted in Washington by the same people who said the Iraqis would greet us as liberators with horror. Like, this is insane, and we're going to nuclear war, and you're totally out of control, you don't know what you're doing. Is anybody going to say, you know what, honestly, I was wrong? And I guess it kind of worked.
Well, the resistance will never admit that Trump was able to make this breakthrough. The question is what will come from a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with the president of North Korea and the president of the United States. I equate this is the modern day Nixon goes to China. Mao makes this guy look like a choir boy compared to the brutal dictatorship, hermit kingdom. But look, if Trump is able to make even a modicum of difference in turning back the clock on their nuclear program. And this is going to be huge. And it's going to be good for the United States. It's going to be good for the region. And I think China deserves a lot of credit. The South Koreans deserve a lot of credit. But there's a lot of groundwork in the next month or so.
For sure. And it may not work, but this is not a step, obviously, anyway, toward war. Last question, could any other president, whatever Trump's, whatever he's not good at, could any other president have done this?
It would be hard to believe they could. Why? Is because he's so unorthodox. He's willing to do things that Foggy Bottom would never have entertained, and that's why he goes around people and does things that are totally unexpected.
That's a good point. Yeah, the State Department did not do this.
Oh my God, of course not.
Yeah, of course not. Thank you for reminding us of that.
Pleasure.
Brad Blakeman, great to see you. Thanks. We have confirmed Attorney General Jeff Sessions has appointed a prosecutor to lead a team looking into concerns from Republican lawmakers, including Uranium One. Tomorrow night, the Attorney General joins us on our set, 8 p.m. Eastern, to discuss that. Sorry, we missed News Quiz tonight. It's tomorrow. Good night from Washington. Here's Sean.
All right, Tucker, thank you.